The house wasn't especially grand. Not the kind you'd expect from a Hollywood actor with decades of screen time under his belt. Nestled behind a wall of ivy-covered hedges in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, it was modest by celebrity standards: single-story, white stucco, Spanish tile roof. Quiet, almost forgettable. But Leslie Nielsen had lived there for the last 20 years of his life, right up until his death in 2010. It was the only house he ever truly called home, friends said. He'd chosen it not for the prestige, but for the silence. "I've had enough noise to last 3 lifetimes," he once told a neighbor. For over a decade after his passing, the property remained in legal limbo: family disputes, unpaid taxes, and a strange string of contractors who all backed out halfway through remodeling jobs. It sat empty, gathering dust, leaves, and whispers. That was until Tyler and Emma Nance bought it in the summer of 2023. They were young professionals from San Diego, he in tech, she a freelance illustrator. The couple wanted out of the city's chaos, craving quiet, space, and charm. When the listing popped up at $400,000 below market value, they couldn't believe their luck. Sure, the place needed work, but it had good bones. Emma especially loved the sunroom, with its arched windows and original 1950s tile. What they didn't know was that the property had never successfully passed a full home inspection. The electrical system had odd spikes. The basement flooded mysteriously every fall. Workers complained of tools vanishing, sudden nosebleeds, or inexplicable migraines. One roofer claimed he saw someone peeking through the attic vent, an old man with white hair and a grin that didn't fit his face. Tyler laughed it off. Probably just LA rats. Emma wasn't so sure. The longer she stayed in the house, the more it felt off. Not evil exactly, but wrong. Like a scene in a comedy film that suddenly turns too quiet. The first night it was just the pipes. Houses creak. Tyler slept through it. But Emma woke up at 3:12 a.m. to what she thought was a TV turned on in another room. Static. Then a voice, low, amused, whispering. "Surely you can't be serious." She froze. That line. It was from Airplane, but the TV wasn't on. And Tyler was still snoring. She told herself she'd dreamed it. The next night it happened again. Same time. Same voice. "Don't call me Shirley." This time she got up, barefoot on the cold tile, and walked into the hallway. It was empty, save for the portrait she had just hung outside the guest bathroom, except now it was crooked. And there were wet footprints on the tile. They stopped at her feet. She didn't sleep that night. It escalated slowly, and always in the same tone: mocking, playful, but unmistakably calculated. Emma's shampoo bottle was replaced with maple syrup. Tyler's laptop played fart noises on a loop when he tried to launch Zoom. An old whoopee cushion appeared on their bed. The thermostat reset itself to 69 degrees every morning, no matter what they set it to. One morning, every mirror in the house had the word "BOO" written backward in shaving cream. They thought someone was messing with them. A neighbor, maybe, but the security cameras only caught static every night between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m., never longer. Emma began researching the house, and the more she read, the stranger it got. Leslie Nielsen, though best known for slapstick comedy, had been deeply interested in the paranormal in his final years. Friends recalled him playing with EVP recorders, experimenting with seances, even joking that he'd come back for one more laugh. Most thought he wasn't serious. But then Emma found something buried in a YouTube clip, an interview from 2008, 1 year before he stopped making public appearances. The host asked what he thought of the afterlife. "I plan on haunting someone, tastefully, comedically. Why go quietly when you can keep the gags going?" The couple had avoided the basement. It smelled like mildew, and the bulb always flickered. But when their breaker failed in the middle of a rare September storm, Tyler had no choice but to go down there. The air was dense, heavy. As he flicked the switch, the light sputtered and then glowed. In the corner sat a dusty trunk. He'd never noticed it before. Old, leather-bound, with brass corners. He opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of VHS tapes, hand-labeled. Farts, Volume 1, funeral gags, dog reactions, Emma's surprise. He froze. That last one. It was dated 2 weeks ago. He popped it into the old VHS player they'd found upstairs and never used. The footage was from inside their home, silent, grainy, but unmistakable. Emma in the kitchen, humming. A slow pan toward her, as if someone or something was holding the camera just out of frame. Then static. A laugh track. Then nothing. Tyler didn't tell Emma what he saw. That night, the static came earlier. Louder. The voice was clearer. "You're living in my punchline." They lasted 6 months. Emma was the first to say it out loud. "We have to go." She looked pale, thinner, tired. "He won't stop." Tyler tried to argue new houses cost too much. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe they needed a priest or a shaman or a very good lawyer, but by December they were gone. The listing went up again, once more below market price. The real estate agent never mentioned the hauntings, of course. Just said the previous owners moved for work. But everyone on the street knows. The house still sits quiet during the day. But at night, windows flicker with television static. Laughter echoes down the hedged driveway. And at 3:12 a.m., passers-by swear they hear someone whisper from the open window. "And don't call me Shirley. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story." The Nances had only been gone for a few weeks before the house returned to its still, uncomfortable silence. Yet, things began to change in subtle ways that weren't immediately obvious. The house seemed to breathe differently, as though the air itself had become heavier, more saturated with history. The once clean surfaces in the kitchen, where Emma had spent hours over morning coffees and sketches, now seemed to collect dust at an accelerated pace, and the floors creaked with an unusual rhythm. It felt like something was moving through the house, though nothing was ever seen. The new owners, Alice and Martin LeClaire, were a middle-aged couple who had relocated from the East Coast. Alice was a writer, Martin a lawyer, both seasoned professionals looking for a place to settle in the California sun. The house had, on the surface, everything they wanted. It had character, charm, a story to tell. What they didn't know was that the house had its own story to tell, one that wasn't written in any real estate listing or glowing testimonial. The day they moved in was a typical sunny California afternoon, the air fresh with a crispness that only the ocean breeze could provide. The couple didn't think twice as they unloaded their belongings into the house, the wood beams overhead creaking in protest as the furniture shifted through the doorframe. Their first night was peaceful, just the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees outside. But Alice couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. As night settled in, she wandered into the living room to light a candle in the fireplace. The house was dark, too dark for her liking. The large windows, while beautiful in daylight, gave the house an oppressive quality at night, as though the outside world was pressing in. She thought about opening a window, but the air outside was too cold, too damp. Alice paused by the old, weathered mantelpiece, her fingers brushing over the surface. It was a beautiful piece of furniture, polished wood with brass accents, though it looked a little out of place in the otherwise minimalist design they'd opted for in the house. As she stood there, the silence around her grew thicker, more oppressive. That was when it happened, a faint sound, a scratch at the back of her mind, so subtle that it took her a moment to place it. It was the distinct sound of a laugh. At first, Alice thought it was Martin, trying to make her jump, but she turned around to find him sitting in the other room, his head buried in a book. She felt a chill on the back of her neck, as though someone had just passed behind her. She glanced up at the mirror above the mantel. In the reflection, she swore she saw a shadow move, not from her own form, but from someone else standing just outside the frame. But when she whipped around, no one was there. The house felt different after that night. It wasn't something she could put into words, just a lingering presence. A feeling that something was tucked away in the corners of every room, watching, waiting, as though every object had its own memory, its own history it was trying to tell her. Martin, for his part, dismissed it. He chalked it up to the settling of the house, the creaks of the wood beams, the inevitable oddities of a new space. "It's just your imagination," he told Alice, as he always did when she spoke of the things she couldn't explain. But Alice wasn't so sure anymore. She couldn't shake the sensation that they weren't alone in the house. A few days later, The house seemed to intensify. The rooms no longer felt welcoming. Each time Alice walked down the hallway, she swore the wallpaper appeared different, more faded in some places, as though time was accelerating in the house, as though it were growing older before her eyes. She would step into the kitchen, only to find that the cabinets were slightly ajar. The drawer handles turned at odd angles, as if someone had been searching through them in the middle of the night. Martin never saw it. He was too wrapped up in his work to notice, and Alice found herself questioning whether she was imagining the changes at all. That night, the laughter came again, louder this time, unmistakable. It didn't come from the TV, didn't emanate from the speakers. It was a soft, airy laugh, coming from behind her. It was so real that she could feel the hairs on her arms stand up. She turned sharply, heart hammering, her breath catching in her throat. There was no one there, and then she heard the voice. It was low, almost a whisper, but somehow it carried, as if the words were coming from the very walls themselves. "I told you I'd be back." Alice froze. She knew that voice. It was the voice of Leslie Nielsen, distinct, unmistakable. The laugh had been his, the one from Airplane. But this was different. This wasn't comedy. This was something else entirely. She tried to explain it away. Old houses creaked and groaned. It was a trick of the acoustics, or maybe the house was just settling again. But deep down, Alice knew that wasn't it. She could feel it, the presence, moving through the air like a cold draft. There was a weight to it now, a heaviness that pressed down on her chest whenever she was alone in the house. By morning, she was shaken but didn't speak of it to Martin. She didn't want to seem irrational. But the events continued, one after another. Doors that wouldn't stay shut. Lights that flickered on and off in the middle of the night. The feeling of being watched closely, intimately, like someone was standing just behind her, waiting for her to acknowledge them. And then came the tap on the shoulder. It was subtle at first, just a light pressure against her skin, as if someone were standing right behind her, leaning in. But when she turned to look, there was no one. Her heart raced, and she swore she heard the soft sound of a chuckle in her ear, followed by the same voice. "I told you, Alice. I'm just getting started." Alice couldn't take it anymore. One evening, as the sounds of laughter and whispering continued to haunt her, she decided to do some digging. She found an old video interview with Leslie Nielsen from the late 2000s. He sat comfortably in an armchair, wearing his signature smile, speaking in a voice so jovial it was almost soothing. "I've always had a sense of humor," he said in the clip, his eyes twinkling. "In fact, I plan on haunting someone after I'm gone. I think it'll be a lot of fun." Alice watched it twice, then 3 times before she was convinced. This was no coincidence. It wasn't just an actor's quirk. Leslie Nielsen, in his peculiar, comedic way, had made good on his promise. He hadn't just left the house behind when he passed. He had left his spirit there, wrapped up in his humor, in his essence. And now it wasn't just haunting the house, it was haunting her. The days that followed grew more unnerving. It wasn't just the laughter anymore. It was the presence. Alice began to feel it during every quiet moment. Every time she stepped into the house, a cold draft would brush past her, or a distant sound would echo through the halls. She could no longer pinpoint where the laughter originated from, but she could always hear it faint, like the sound of an old sitcom rerun, playing at the edge of her consciousness. It was subtle, creeping, and insidious. The voice, too, had grown clearer. That same tone, dripping with mischief and levity, would drift across the room, carrying phrases she'd never heard in person, but which were unmistakable. "Just a joke, Alice. Just a joke." The walls, it seemed, had become conduits for his humor, a strange electric connection that pulled his voice through the fabric of the house. She could almost feel him, Leslie Nielsen, hovering near her, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to spring another gag. And the worst part was that Alice could never tell if it was him or if the house was simply toying with her, making her question her sanity. Each time the sound grew stronger, each time she turned and saw that ever-watchful shadow out of the corner of her eye, it was like she was spiraling deeper into the madness of this place. Martin began to notice it too, but he tried to rationalize it. as men often do when confronted with the irrational. He told Alice it was just stress, that the stress of moving, of starting over in a new city was getting to them both. But deep down, he could feel the weight in the air too. He started to spend more time out of the house, seeking comfort in the office, looking for distractions in case Alice was right. One evening, in the fading light of a stormy sunset, Alice ventured into the basement. She'd never gone down there before, not since the day they moved in, but tonight, something inside her told her she had to. Maybe it was the same strange pull that Leslie Nielsen had once described, an urge to confront the very source of the disturbance. The basement was cold, the air thick with mildew. Alice descended the creaky wooden stairs, the faint light from a single bulb swinging above her casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. She was drawn to the farthest corner, where the old trunk still sat, its brass corners glinting in the low light. She knew, without a doubt, that it had been there all along. She had never seen it before, but now, in the dim space, it seemed impossibly familiar, like something had always been waiting for her to discover it. Her fingers shook as she reached for the latch and opened the trunk. Inside, nestled beneath a dusty blanket, were a collection of VHS tapes. The same tapes she had seen earlier, the ones she didn't want to believe were real. Her heart pounded in her chest as she began to pull them out one by one, reading the familiar labels that chilled her to the bone. Pranks for all seasons. Alice's day in the kitchen. Laughter echoes. Her breath caught in her throat as her fingers landed on a tape that stood out among the others. It was labeled simply, "I'm watching you." Alice had seen enough. Without even thinking, she grabbed the tape and rushed upstairs, the heavy weight of dread filling her chest as she ran. In the living room, she inserted the VHS into the old player, her hands trembling as the screen flickered to life. At first, the tape was static, just the hiss of grainy black and white footage. But then, slowly, the image began to sharpen. It was Leslie Nielsen's living room, the same one they now occupied. He was sitting in his chair, as calm and collected as ever, but the air around him seemed different, darker, heavier. There was a tension that radiated off him, a sense of unease that never appeared on the screen. The camera zoomed in on Leslie, his smile unwavering. "Welcome to my home," he said, his voice warm but laced with something darker. "It's funny, really. People think I'm just a clown, a jokester. But the truth is, my jokes don't end when I do." The room went cold. Alice could feel the hair on the back of her neck stand up as his words sank in. She looked away from the screen, but the voice continued, as if he were standing right beside her. "I told you, didn't I? It's all part of the show. And the show, well, it never ends." Alice felt her heart thundering in her chest, and then the screen flickered once again, the image changing this time. It was her, sitting at the kitchen table, just as she had done countless times before. The camera moved slowly, focusing on her face, her eyes wide with shock, her body frozen in place. She wanted to scream, but her throat closed up, her body paralyzed. The room around her began to twist. The walls stretched, the shadows deepened, and suddenly, she wasn't in her home anymore. She was in a place she didn't recognize, something darker, more oppressive, where the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The laughter came then, echoing through the air like 1,000 voices mocking her, all of them coming from somewhere just out of sight. "I told you it wouldn't be just a joke," the voice whispered, now surrounding her. "I'm never truly gone, Alice. I'm always here, watching, waiting." The screen went black. The next day, Martin came home to find Alice gone. The house, once so full of life, now felt utterly empty, as though it had lost its soul in the dark recesses of time. The drawers were left half open, the kitchen light still flickering as if nothing had changed. But Alice was nowhere to be found. The police were called. Neighbors gathered. But no one could explain where Alice had gone. The house was locked up tight, and the footage from the VHS tapes, the eerie whispering voice, all seemed like figments of her imagination. A trick played on her by an old, decaying home. But Martin knew better. As the weeks wore on, he began to hear it too. The laughter, the whispers, the unmistakable feeling of someone just beyond his reach. And then, one night, in the dim glow of the streetlights, he heard Leslie's voice again loud and clear. "Don't worry, Martin. You're next." The house, as it always had, waited. And in the silence of the night, the echoes of laughter would continue to haunt the walls, long after the last owner had gone. And so it was that Leslie Nielsen's house, with its dark humor and eerie legacy, became just another chapter in the strange history of Hollywood's haunted homes. But it would never be finished because, as Leslie once said with a grin, the show was never over. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.